I think we can get started with our guest speakers presentation from today, starting with Olivier and Marcus from blokdots. Yeah, the stage is yours, guys. You can share your screen and yeah, looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Thanks. So, hi. Thank you, Julia, for the kind introduction, and thank you, ProtoPie, for having us. Just like as a brief reminder, I'm Olivier. I'm the co-creator of blokdots, and with me I have Marcus, the head of the digital product school, or head of the interaction design of the digital product school in Munich. But he's also helping us with like strategy at blokdots. So before we get started, I just wanted to tell you a little bit of the backstory and where we're coming from. So in my mind, designers envision the future and solve problems. So to come up with that, we usually come up with clever ideas and hopefully they change the world. So before doing what we do now, Marcus and I worked at IDEO as interaction designers and creative technologists. We were researching people's needs, envisioning the future, testing ideas as quickly as possible and as real as necessary to see if our designs are actually solving the issues as intended. And just like Fredo also mentioned right now, products we were working on were often quite complex. We not only had multiple stakeholders and multiple touch points across, but we also had like different devices, and that often also involved hardware that didn't even exist yet. So that meant that we had to like in our work need to tinker with electronics and needed to prototype the interactions with the physical devices. So just that you get a little bit of a feeling of this, Marcus and I often were in this little fab lab that was specifically set up for that. So we had a laser cutter, a 3D printer, and of course, a lot of electronics where we could build out from. And out of these, we were like creating prototype like these ones. So what you can see over here is, for example, like an insulin pump that was like a prototype to test with users and patients that were suffering from diabetes, if they could actually, if that would like support the right user experience for them. Or we were also like creating like these car diagnostic plug-in devices so that we could see if like the data we would get out of a real car is helping us to solve predictive maintenance and therefore get like a better product value. So now if you know anything about IDEO, you know that design thinking and human-centered design are the core of how work is done over there. That means testing with users early and often. So we would start framing a question and come up with a hypothesis. Then we would build a prototype and learn from the reaction that we were generating, which then usually leads to another set of questions. It's actually impossible to put too much emphasis on this. If you want to make great products, you need to get out of the lab and get external feedback as soon as possible. So Marcus' day job at the Digital Product School in Munich is all about teaching aspiring product designers exactly that, so that they get this mindset and the tools to actually do this. So in our teams at IDEO, we were specifically set up to do this. With the necessary expertise, our lab space, and easy access to materials. But we know that many teams and designers working on the user experience of connected products don't have such a luxury and don't want to go that deep into electronics and code. This is where blokdots comes in. And for a lot of areas for prototyping, you already have great tools. For furniture and physical projects, we can start with cardboard and later go into 3D printing or similar techniques. User interface design used to be a lot more tricky and a lot more static. But like luckily with tools like ProtoPie, we put the power of realistic prototyping into the hands of designers. So we can test elaborate concepts even without programming knowledge. And blokdots aims to do exactly that, but with hardware and electronics, and do these hardware interactions as simple as cardboard. I mean, we have so far already like great prototyping tools, but even tools like Arduino have a lot of hurdles. One needs to be able to code, one needs to have a basic understanding of electrical engineering. And so often developers are hired, which take a lot of time to do so. And ultimately, all of this costs a lot of money. And like I said, we want to make interactive hardware prototyping as simple as building a model with cardboard. We want everyone to enable to sketch with hardware. So just as a brief overview, how do we actually do this? We have like 3 major steps to do so. So primarily, We build up on the Grove system by Seed Studio, which enables a simple solution to hardware wiring without, or like hardware connecting without wiring. You can see like these little elements that have just like a plug and play connection. So you can just use the hardware right away. The main part of blokdots, of course, is our software. We use simple logic clauses that are intended to be very easy to understand, so that even like a total beginner who's never coded before is able to build their sketch. And thirdly, blokdots is able to extend to all the tools you already know and love, making it easy to connect your hardware to your interface prototypes so that you can easily create the connected experiences that Freda was talking about before. It doesn't matter if it's like ProtoPie, or even later on, you can go into more elaborate sketches and connect them via WebSockets. So just to sum it up again, so we have the plug and play hardware, we have our simple to use software, and we try to have like the seamless extendability to the other tools you already know. But instead of me telling you all about the concepts behind blokdots, I want to hand it over to Marcus so he can show to you like what it would feel like in a real world example.
All right, thanks. So I will try to magically take over the presentation now. And for today's demo, we have created kind of like a fictional scenario to illustrate how we see blokdots being utilized. So I'll say hi to the fabulous Great Products Studio. Now, if COVID-19 has taught us anything, it's that good air quality is actually really important for our health. And one way to approximate air quality and also the need for ventilation of indoor spaces, is to measure the CO2 content in the air. Now, our Great Product Studio has decided to build a product around that indoor quality. And they want to, and we want to actually use that as an opportunity to show you how we iterate a design with blokdots and follow this question, hypothesis, prototype, and answer cycle. All right, so we now got our hands on this spiffy new CO2 sensor. I have to admit, it doesn't look like much, but it gets the job done. And so we're going to connect that to blokdots and set it up. It's as easy as plugging in this cable, adding it in the software, and here we go already. So the next question in our product design department is, what are we going to do with this? It's probably a good start if we can somehow tell people, like, if the air is good, if it's just a little iffy, or if it needs to be ventilated immediately. Now for that, we can, for instance, add a display. Again, cable in there, plug it in, ready to go. Now we can grab the sensor data and the information from the CO2 sensor and just push it over into the display to show everyone what the content looks like. Hey, that already works like a charm. And to add a little bit on it, for good measure, we can even add some color coding here, so that instead of reading everything on this tiny little display, we can also take in the information at a glance. Yeah, I think that's much better already. However, it still kind of needs people to have this always in their field of vision. So why don't we add an audible alert? Let's say we let our prototype beep when the CO2 is going above a critical level. Or, hey, if we have such an alarm, actually it really only makes sense if there's actually someone in the room. So we could also add a motion sensor. Now, with so many creative ideas here, I think our team at Great Product Studio is ready for our first round of user testing. So let's get out in the field. And the good news is people really appreciate good air quality and they're willing to spend some time on it. However, this buzzer sound is really quite annoying. And we're probably going to fix that, but a little bit later, because we've actually found out something way more important when we talk to people. Because people don't really want to react once the air is already critical. Instead, we should probably proactively manage air quality. Now, that's a very different challenge here. So what can we do about it? Opening the windows is probably a good idea, a good start. So can we somehow attach some kind of motor there and open a window? So mechanically, this now gets a little bit more challenging, but I think we can handle at least the electronics. For example, with this little servo motor here. attach it to the window, set it up in blokdots, and let's see what we can do with this. Now, this is a good start, but however, for really good ventilation, I think it needs a bit more of a push. So let's also add a fan here. Now, when we want to bring, for instance, regular household electronics into the prototype, we can use a relay to switch them on and off. This also gives us a way to interact with hardware outside of the Grove ecosystem and just like plug into, I don't know, maybe a toaster in the future. Anyway, I think we already have a pretty great prototype together here, and we can do some more user testing and market validation. Now, this is kind of what blokdots really wants you to do. Sketching, testing, a lot of hardware interactions, and so that you are able to define your product. And yes, it really all works together. It's nice. But at the same time, this is only level 1. Now, let's take it to the next level. And what we mean with that is connecting hardware to interactions with apps and services. That's what we refer to as these connected products that Fred already introduced to us. So smart home appliances or generally IoT devices. And for that, we have 2 different integrations with ProtoPie. First, there's our ProtoPie Connect integration. That's the pro solution for orchestrating multiple prototypes with external hardware and other systems. And then, we're especially proud of this one, we have our ProtoPie Player integration, where the ProtoPie Player on your mobile device can talk directly to blokdots. And this one is even available with the free version of ProtoPie. Now back to our scenario from before. What can we do now with ProtoPie? So let's imagine we had this market evaluation and it comes back and we see that we're kind of late for this consumer market for air quality products. It's already kind of saturated. But we discovered there's a big opportunity for us in smart building management and larger offices. So I'd say this sounds like it's time to create some kind of dashboard and test it with facility managers. So after quickly whipping up UI design for that, we can put that into ProtoPie and add some interactions on top of it, maybe even some small animations to really bring it to life. And we have a nice kind of like first prototype. And now comes the magic. So when we add the ProtoPie integration to blokdots, and then also scan this QR code to get the data over to ProtoPie, and then tell in blokdots that whenever this sensor is getting a new value, let's send it over to ProtoPie. And that's all there is to it. Now, the sensor data can flow easily from blokdots into our UI prototype. And inside ProtoPie, using the receive trigger, we can get data. And this gives us the ability to work with realistic data in a functional prototype without writing any line of code. So our team at Great Products is now ready to go to some user testing with building managers. And I mean, of course, every time you go out into the field, you usually bring back some new ideas. And we could really do a lot more here. We could add a temperature sensor, we could go for smart heating, lots of other things that could be done. And at the end of it, we would have some pretty happy building management, I'm assuming. And after a final round of user testing, we might also find out that, yes, building management is very heavy, but the people who actually sit in these offices also want some measure of control over their environment. Now, if we get super techy, we could also cover that with a user-facing application. So let's give it a try. Again, with a few adjustments, we have our dashboard scaled down to a mobile UI, and we can reuse the same prototype setup from before to now connected to hardware as well. And finally, people are back in control over all that building automation. Now, if we were to take this setup, replicate it a few times, while exchanging this ProtoPie Player integration that we have for the ProtoPie Connect integration, then we could really take this setup and deploy it as an on-site test with maybe a few selected rooms for a couple of days. And that, I think, would give us a lot of good insight into the real-world usage of this. Now, at the end of this, everyone is super happy. We got our product tested, we have it defined, great product studio has their multi-million business case tight and ready to go. And this brings me to the end of our scenario. So let's say goodbye to Good Products Inc. And we hope that we could inspire you a little bit with this story, because we believe that this way of working and prototyping will play a big role in the future of prototyping. And we are making blokdots so that you can spend more time on making better products. So thanks for having us today, and back to Julia.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. I did find it inspiring, and I hope our audience today did as well. Right. So, like I said, we prepared a first Q&A session. I'm gonna check the Q&A box. Yes, so there are. I will read some of the messages that you left us. However, I think some of you messaged us, the hosts and the panelists. So awesome, really cool. A lot of opportunities to be creative, indeed. Getting my visa out to buy blokdots, yes. And let's see if we have. If there are any questions for. Okay, so Nat is asking whether the blokdots hardware is sold via your website. Can any of you cover this question?
So the blokdots or the hardware kits is not directly sold via our website, but you can easily just get the growth kit, for example, on any reseller, or if you just have an Arduino or Arduino clone lying at home, you can also just use that. So it's open that you even can use the regular Arduino that most of you, I guess, already have to test it out. We just recommend the other kit as it is a lot easier to plug and play. But yeah. On our website, you at least should find the link and the name again to where to get it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. If maybe Rebecca or Patricia can add the blokdots website in the chat box. Yeah, so Mire, I think Patricia will be covering your question shortly. Okay, so this is done. Okay, so Philip is asking whether you plan to make blokdots open source or implement a paying strategy to make sure it will survive in the future. So it's a question from the chat from Philip.
Hi, Philip. So at the moment, we don't have any plans to open source it. And yes, we eventually want to put in some form of payment for the app. We haven't figured out what exactly yet. We have a dream that we can somehow find a model where some of the functionality will be available for free, so they can really take it out for a spin and try it out. And then maybe at the more professional level, for instance, when you really want to interact with a lot of different services or so on, that might be a pro version where we also asked for some money.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcus. I did see another question from Francesca. So she is asking, would you be able to share more about the testing? How many people and whether you tested across different building types? So yeah, would you mind?
So maybe I should, I think I maybe was a bit quick at the beginning, but what I showed today is kind of like a fictional scenario. So we didn't actually build a CO2 system and test it with building managers. However, maybe as what is curious for you is also that we do run a lot of workshops for blokdots, and we regularly see people playing with it and building stuff. And it's amazing that with just a half a day of getting into it, people are really able to create their own prototypes and test them with users. And that's really what's driving us here.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcus. We do have another question from Florian. So Florian is asking, beyond prototyping, do you also enable users to access and modify the embedded code you generate with blokdots? Or do embedded programmers have to start from scratch afterwards? Also in the chat. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Thank you, Florian. So far we have a code generator within blokdots that generates like JavaScript code that you can then execute from Node, which is building up on the Johnny 5 library that you might know if you're in the hardware business. But we are also intending to like get other elements going that you can run it natively on Arduino later on. But for now, to answer your question, yes, you can continue seamlessly into the next step to developers and programmers.
Amazing. Thank you, Olivier, for the answer. So let me check. So, okay, Ivan is asking in the Q&A box whether next to the Groove kit, you also need to buy an Arduino, any Arduino. So he says he has one, but it's about 4 years old. So what are the compatible Arduino boards?
So just to clarify, there are 2 Grove kits. There's the one Grove kit, which is just a shield that you can plug in onto any Arduino or not any. So we support currently the Arduino Uno, basically any Arduino Uno you have. So I think the 4 years old should be fine. We support the Arduino Leonardo and the Arduino Micro, and you can check on the website which Arduinos you support. In the Grove kit that we showed today, there's actually an Arduino included too, or like an Arduino clone. So don't worry about that too much.
Awesome. Okay, one final question, and then we will cover the next presentation. Is remote sensing or actuating possible in the same way as Zigbee?
I think that is, so Zigbee, as far as I know, is a radio protocol or technology. We don't really have wireless as part of the blokdot setup yet. It's another thing we might be looking into for the future. But Zigbee in particular is certainly is probably not the technology that we will be aiming for. So no, unfortunately, no Zigbee-like remote sensing at the moment.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, everyone. So thank you for your great questions, and thank you, Olivier and Marcus, for covering the answers